This is the School Success Podcast, a podcast for school leaders to learn from other school leaders what's working and what's not, and to get inspiration and encouragement, as well as strategies to grow school enrollment, connect with families, retain teachers, recruit teachers, and everything in between. You guys are heroes, and I cannot thank you enough for pouring into this next generation that's coming behind us. My goal is you will take at least one thing away from every episode that you can take back to your school to make it better than it is right now. Please enjoy the School Success Podcast. This podcast is brought to you by the Herzog Foundation.
Time for school.
Hey, School Success Makers. Welcome to another edition of the School Success Podcast. I'm your host, Mitchell Slater. I'm joined by a good friend out of Issaquah, Washington, Greg Forrest, who is the head of school of Summit Classical Christian School there. And he's doing some really cool things, something really specific, talking about we're going to talk about money today. So that's going to be always a fun one. Everybody loves talking about money. If we're at church, let's talk about money. If we're at schools, let's talk about money. It's always fun times. So this is going to be a good one. This stuff kind of comes up pretty often in the schools that I talk with on the podcast. So this will be a fun one to dive into. Somebody who's going right in the middle of this, talking about capital campaigns and some things around that. But before we dive into all of those things, I do want to pass it off to Greg to introduce himself. So Greg, welcome back to the podcast. It's been a year or two and you're back here for another episode. So welcome back.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. I actually re-listened to the last one from, I think it was my first or second year at Summit, and I just kind of chuckled at where we were and where we are now and where the Lord's brought us. So thanks for having me.
That's awesome. Well, thanks for coming back, man. I appreciate it. He'd reached out. Those that listen, he'd reached out when we sent out a call through the Herzog Foundation looking for guests, and he's like, "Hey, I'll come talk again. You want to talk again?" And him and I have the same barber, so it's really, really cool. and those that are not watching us on YouTube and listening to this, we're both bald, so we both either do our own hair, or maybe he does. He's bougie and wants to pay for somebody to shave his head. I don't know, but I do my own. Do you do your own, Greg?
I do shave my own head. Yeah, it makes for some great jokes.
So it does, and I would say I'm very confident as a bald person and proud of it. So I know the students at church, man, I'm they call me Mr. Clean on a regular basis. And so I just embrace that I'm Mr. Clean, and that's okay. Because if you take offense to it, it's going to be a bad day for you, since I got another, hopefully 50, 60 years to live on this earth. We'll see. But before we jump into all the topics of money today, I always ask the same question. You've gotten this one before, but now you're at Issaquah, which I don't think is where you were when I asked this question. So I have been to Issaquah one time. I had a friend that lived there when he worked for a corporation in Seattle. And so if I was to visit you in Issaquah, what would you say, Mitchell? You need to eat this and do this to experience Issaquah, Washington.
Eat this and do this. What a good question. I think the Pacific Northwest, obviously you have to eat some salmon. Specifically, I would say salmon chowder at Ivar's restaurant. So it's a restaurant that was started down near the water, but they have kind of a chain through the Pacific Northwest. And so have some great fish options, some fish and chips and salmon chowder, clam chowder. So that's what you need to eat. And then what you would need to do is go see a waterfall. Not too far from us, we have a bunch of beautiful waterfalls, Franklin Falls and Twin Falls and Snoqualmie Falls, all within probably about a half hour, and great hikes. It is an absolutely beautiful place to live. Or I started this summer snorkeling in the rivers, because why not? I know it's kind of a weird thing. I met one other guy who did it, and I felt weird because he was a unique fella. So it's great. It's great.
Okay. Is that a wetsuit type of weather? Because it's pretty cold water in Seattle, right?
Really cold water. It's like a long cold plunge.
Okay, I'll take it. Because I figured that's going to make you breathe a little bit differently after you get inside of there. So I love snorkeling. I'm in Florida, so obviously snorkeling's a little bit different here. So I knew that'd be a little bit colder, but I'm all down for that. And obviously I love the area of Washington you guys are in. It's absolutely beautiful. And when I think of them, I think of chowder as well, but I'm thinking of what's the place called in Seattle? Pike Place Chowder, is that what they call it? The main clam chowder place. It's super delicious. I don't even like clams, so that's awesome. So all right, I got it. Go to get some salmon chowder. I'm gonna go snorkeling in the river while looking at some waterfalls. I like it. I haven't heard that one before.
The water on the West Coast in rivers is just so clear and so beautiful compared to the East Coast. So it really is. It's a magnificent place to be.
I think to add to this, you should go snorkeling while fly fishing for salmon or trout in the river. That's That's awesome. That's like a Florida man type of thing. I feel like that sounds like when people make fun of Florida men. So I don't know. It sounds really good. I want to see you do it.
Yeah, remind me to show you my fishing video off camera later.
Okay, deal. So diving in today, I know you want to give a little bit of backstory before we dive into a capital campaign. So I know you guys, I believe, were doing a capital campaign for a new building that I think is either built or in the process of finishing up. I can't remember. I know it was a couple months since we talked
We're
last.
done. We moved in.
Yep.
Sorry to cut you off, but yeah, I'm ready. Let's jump in. So I came on board at Summit 5 years ago. So this is the start of my 5th year. And when I started at Summit, we had moved campuses. So we moved from a bit further out, a little bit closer into more populous suburb. And that was intended to be the 5-year plan. So moved campuses, it's going to be the 5-year plan. And as I start going around and counting, we had a growing high school, a small number of high school students at the time, but they were all aging up. We had combined classes. And so, as enrollment demands start coming in and we're working well with, delivering on our promise and being good partners to our family, it was tail end of COVID. And so all the cultural things were going on. And as many private Christian schools were experiencing growth, we were doing our best to steward that. So what was supposed to be the 5-year plan ended up being a 1-year plan. And so we went from 180 to 235 to 275 to 325 to now 350. And it was all beautiful, wonderful growth. The Lord being kind to draw families. We didn't do a ton of marketing. It was word of mouth primarily. But after that first year, as I'm counting heads and counting, like there was a curtain between one of our classrooms. It just wasn't going to be a long-term option. So we split off to a second campus for our lower school that next year. That was never intended to be like a long-term or permanent solution. It was supposed to just be 1 year, but ended up being 2. That second year, they doubled the cost of their rent. So we went from like this sweet little church that was charging next to nothing to like over tripling our rent to then doubling our campuses to, and so we were just spending so much money monthly. And we were out of room. We were out of room in the first campus. We were out of room in the second campus. And we continued to have families that were looking to partner with us as we really seek to partner with parents in their God-given task of education. So May 31st, 2023, the board and I had been really thinking through, praying through, discussing how do we find a permanent solution. And it really took up a team of we had a building stewardship team keeping their pulse on the current commercial market in real estate. There was like 2.5 million vacant square feet that were being built in Bellevue. So during COVID, obviously the work from home thing blew up. So a lot of the towers, Microsoft, Amazon, they were building up. And then they said, we actually only need a third of what we initially thought. So there was a ton of real estate going up in our downtown area, the city next to us. And then that impacted the interstate kind of corridor where we were and where we were looking. So the Lord was so kind. An investor had bought the property. He had it under contract with a developer. They were going to tear the building down, build up. And, the vacancy happened. There was a wetland on the property that cut their footprint in half. And so he ended up selling it to us at a loss. And so anyways, over 50,000 square foot building. It was a GE healthcare building. It was not set up to be a school. There's garage doors. There was like a call center upstairs, a few offices, some microscope manufacturing that was going on. And so we were May 31st, 2023. So just over 2 years ago, one of our board members, our board treasurer at the time, got up and said, "Hey, here's our journey of where we come from. Facilities has just always been a thing that we've struggled to figure out and find permanence in. And so let's get after it. Let's do a building campaign. There's this property we're going to pursue, and here we go." So it's kind of an announcement at the beginning. Target property, price, purchase, and renovations were 16.5 million, and that was going to be a combination of funds. How that was going to be financed, the financing we did was pretty interesting and unique. It's through a company called Semble, and what that allows for is basically your community becomes the bank. And so parents are able to divert retirement funds, specifically like IRAs, or cash, obviously, but divert and loan to the school. So it becomes its own LLC that funds the purchase and renovations. And so that was the major funding thing. We were able to do a low interest rate. It's interest only for 5 years, but then there's a balloon payment, right? So we're not just always kicking the can down the road. Obviously, we were trying to raise as much cash as we could, and saw some really wonderful generosity amongst our community there. And then we also were trying to really specifically target a few grants. We swung big and we missed big on what we thought was some really promising opportunities, but that's okay. So again, we announced it May 2023. The goal for fundraising was to finish by December 2023. Haha. We're still kind of recouping in some ways some of those investments and sacrifices, and dipping into reserves and that sort of thing. The goal also was that a year later, May 23 to July 24, we were going to be starting to move in to start school on time. Haha, as well. We ended up, target date was end of August, I believe. No, end of July. And then we're going to move in August, start school in September. And we, that pretty quickly fell apart. We ended up having to bump to start the school year in October, which of course had all sorts of implications. But by God's grace, we got it done. We moved in last year. Last year, we like crawled over the finish line. Walls weren't painted, trim wasn't down, carpet wasn't down. And at it was a Friday, I think I wrote down the date, whatever, Friday, end of September, we got occupancy at 3:45. It was the last thing this guy did, the city inspector. And then 45 minutes later, we had 100 people here moving 7 shipping containers of curriculum and furniture and all that stuff in. Funny story, we actually had already moved it in to our auditorium, and then we moved it back out because the fire inspector said, that's not safe. So we had our community sacrifice, and so yeah, we've been in for a year, or not quite a year, but it's the start of the second year, and I'd love to give you a tour sometime when you visit Issaquah again.
Man, I would love that. Well, I got so many questions. I know we have some things we're going to talk about specifically. The financing piece that you mentioned at the beginning, where families could divert some funds, cash, was that still a donation from them, or is this something they're getting paid back when you guys are paying it back, and it's them just loaning money to the school?
Yep, it's a loan. So what I think the beauty of something like this is that, middle-aged parents who have retirement funds sitting there can't really use those funds, but they can redirect them in some cases, right? Depending on their retirement model. So if it's a self-directed IRA, it's really simple. But yeah, effectively, a lot of our families loaned us a lot of money, and so we will have to pay that back. They are getting a small interest return on that. And so it is a sacrifice, right? I mean, out in the open market, they'd be making more. So it's basically impact investing some of their retirement, diverting it it's a 5-year term. And yeah, without that, we would not have been able to get over the finish line. And so some of my advice of what not to do in a capital campaign is some of this type of thing, as far as shotgun and don't burn the boats and that sort of thing. But yeah.
Hey, school success makers, Mitchell here. I just want to take a really quick break from the show to give a big, huge shout out to the Herzog Foundation. I absolutely love the Herzog Foundation. I've been friends and partners with them for a couple years now, but we're bringing it to a whole new level. And I'm excited to share that our very own School Success podcast is now featured on the Herzog Foundation Podcast Network. The Herzog Foundation is a powerhouse of resources designed to support schools like yours, from free training events through the Herzog Foundation Institute to their incredible online news publication, The Lion, and of course, our new podcast, Home. They have everything you need to stay informed and inspired. And if you're dreaming of starting your own Christian school or co-op, don't miss their online course, Schoolbox. It's a fantastic resource to help you get started on the right foot. At School Success, we're proud to partner with the Herzog Foundation to bring you these valuable tools and insights. So visit herzogfoundation.com to explore all they have to offer. Trust me, you won't want to miss out on these amazing opportunities for growth and success. And I love all the people over there, and I know you guys will too. So please, please go check them out, and you won't be disappointed. Now, back to the show. Man, so that's cool. I've never heard of that concept before. So obviously, I wanted to share that because I'm assuming other companies offer that as well. But what was the company? Share it one more time.
Yeah,
That does that.
it's called Semble, and I know I've been in touch with a handful of other schools since we've done our project. It's it's a good mechanism. If you have time, I would try to raise cash. But whether you've raised cash and stalled out, like it just becomes a way for generous people to steward their wealth well, because we have families that gave cash and then also loaned, or loaned and then also gave cash. It's, generous people are going to be generous, but they also do need to steward what God has entrusted to them in a thoughtful way. So I had conversations with some of our generous folks, and is that it really would not be super prudent of me to give you any more money. And so they looked at loaning money as well. So it really is a really unique model. I would think through kind of that long-term implication. There needs to be a plan for your 5-year balloon payment at the end. You can re-up, you can do another Semble campaign is what they call it, a separate thing. At the end of those 5 years, which I know some churches have done in our area, but it's actually an attorney. He calls himself a recovering attorney who was on a school board of a Christian school that said basically, like, surely there's a way, like a way we can make this mechanism work within a community like ours. So yeah, if you're in a relatively affluent area where there's stock options and good retirements being contributed to people, it just becomes a really cool mechanism.
That is really cool. So, and give me for those listening, kind of like a concept of like, okay, you were like, man, we're paying a lot of money to be in these other buildings, and you're trying to get occupancy in this building. You just put a ton of money into to get into. What was like, obviously in your mind, you're like, we can't pay both at the same time. I'm sure that was obviously crossing your mind. It's like, just out of curiosity for like those, myself and listening, what was like, hey, if we don't get in, we're going to be paying this much, and we're still going to be paying this much at the same time. We have to get in this building. What did that breakdown price wise look like?
Yeah, that was actually a really, so if I'm going to jump ahead to one of the things to not do during the capital campaign is don't burn the ships, don't burn the boats unless you have to. And that concept, the historical thing of, if you're I think it was the conquistadors in South or Central America, that they burned the ships. Like they went aboard or went to land, and there was no going back. So at some point, we had kind of a safety net at our last campus for one of the campuses, but not both. And so there was like an assurance of they wanted us to get in or get out, because they also were stewarding their building and had some other potential renters that were following us. So they had to make decisions for their stewardship. And then at a certain point we said, all right, we're out, we're done. And that was, it was that winter before, maybe the spring before, where timeline was still fuzzy and hazy, and we just weren't sure. We wanted a safety net. It would have been great to not have someone directly follow us that next school year at the church we were at, but they did. And they also were moving and had been kind of in this process of moving out of their last space. So yeah, the process of that balance of not paying for rent, I think in the scope of a project where you're raising, over millions of dollars, there will be tens of thousands of dollars that you're going to have to tolerate risking losing. And then hopefully there's an offsetting mechanism. Like for us, we said, well, if you rent this space, then that's going to offset what we owe you, because we did have to sign that lease agreement for a following year to give us the safety net. And then we ended up saying, never mind. And that in our contract with them, it was kind of mitigated through, and if you rent to someone else, that offsets what we owe you or don't owe you.
Okay. Awesome.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, I'm glad it worked out, because I know if you're paying 2 payments at the same time, that's going to be like just bleeding the school, because they're like, well, we didn't budget for that, like having both of them at the same time. Yeah. 100%. And so I know you already hinted at a little bit. We talked about this beforehand. So like the 7 things. Now you've been through this process, and I think you're through it here. What are like maybe 7 things, or however many ends up being, of things like not to do if you're doing a capital campaign or looking to build a new building? Like, what would be some of those things that come to mind for you?
Yeah, I think more like 17 or 27. No, I mean it's so funny to like reflect back on the last 2 years because really the year before we moved, it was, I would say, consultants will say at least half of your time as a head of school is going to be taken up with a building. I think for me, it was probably more like 90% of my time was taken up with the campaign because it wasn't just donor development and donor relations and working with people to fund the thing, but it's also you're working with city. I'm in Washington State. There's a ton of red tape. There's a ton of bureaucracy that we're trying to navigate and work through thoughtfully. So when we went to our community and said, "Hey, we're going to try to raise money, purchase, acquire, renovate, get occupancy for a 50,000 square foot building," there was people that were like, "You are out of your mind," and it's not me. I wasn't the brainchild behind this, but it was truly the hand of God that allowed that to happen in 14 or 18 months. So things not to do. Things I told you, we got in front of our community May 31st, 2023, and we said, "Hey guys, we're gonna try to buy this building. We're gonna raise a bunch of money. We're gonna renovate. We're gonna hold a pledge event in June. Do not, if possible, unless you have to, do not do a shotgun start to a campaign." So, I think best practice says it is a slow, intentional, methodical, strategic, behind the scenes conversation that you are working towards working on a capital campaign. We didn't have that option. We had grown out of our space. We were stewarding new family growth. The second campus was not viable for any more years. And so don't do a shotgun approach unless you have to. Don't, again, this is advice, and I would say we did it, and the Lord blessed it. But you're not supposed to have pledge events where you say, "Hey, everybody, give money." You're supposed to do more intentional, more meaningful, like large group events for fundraising are largely ineffective. And actually, the how I first heard about Herzog Foundation was, that summer, I'm like Googling, "I'm a Christian school administrator. How do I raise, millions of dollars?" I don't know. That wasn't exactly the Google search, but like, I need some training in how do I do donor development well, and how do I do just development and advancement well. And so ended up going to their donor training, their 1.0 donor training, and it really was revolutionary and just opened my eyes to like, oh my goodness, who are these people? What are they doing? And what a beautiful thing they're doing for Christian education. So I don't know if it was at that event or we worked with the focus group. Now we work with leadership and development with Zach Clark. I think it was the focus group that said, don't do a big announcement, don't do a pledge event, and don't do an all call for money. And I was like, okay, great. We already just did all those things. But I think to their point and to the best practice of like raising funds for a capital campaign, a lot of people cannot do a lot of things. You need to be that 80-20 principle where there's a smaller percentage of people who really are going to move the project forward. And it's not that you ignore the 80%. It's just to do an all call just freaks everybody out, And so there's a tendency for those who have not been in this sort of a situation to be like, well, we just need to get the word out. We need to get more people to hear about the thing. And that's not always the right move and the right next step. So don't do a shotgun start unless you have to. Don't do a pledge event unless you have to. Don't ask everybody for money unless you have to. Don't burn the ships unless you have to, right? I mean, it wasn't viable for us to stay in our last setting. And so we did have kind of a safety net with one of the campuses that we talked about. But I mean, ideally, this is a long lead time, long build up, long ramp down. And I do know that our school and many schools are just pulling their, if they had hair, pulling their hair out, trying to figure out what to do with how do we steward growth and demand and enrollment and balance all those things really well. So There are times you gotta burn the ships. You have to move forward. You have to commit. Don't give yourself an out. And so there's like a balance there.
So I've got a question for you. Maybe this will come up in one of the later ones. So now you've kind of been through this process. I know you mentioned a couple of people you're working with, focus group, and then another
Yeah, leadership.
company or person. Yeah.
It's
Is it okay? So is that for those that are now listening and they're like, man, we need to build a building. We need to do something like this. Would you say, hey, for sure, go through a company to do this. Here's how much money they're going to take. Here's how this works. Or, hey, you could do it on your own. Go to Herzog. They give you enough to go off of on your own. Like, what does that look like? Like the makeup of like, now you've been through it. Are you like, man, we probably could have done this on our own, or I'm really glad we used another outside company?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. One of the things, so it's like what not to do, some just valuable things that I learned. One of the things I learned was that you have to staff up in critical roles and jobs. And so our school had we had a part-time development coordinator that we hired just before May 2023. So I had written a grant. We got this partial funding for a development coordinator part-time, like not even a full-time development coordinator. And that was our development department, you know? So we had one part-time teacher who was also going to put on the hat of a development coordinator part-time. And then it was like, all right, and we're going to go raise $16.5 million. And so I mean, Danae Soli, if you're listening to this ever, you are a blessing from the Lord. She did not know what she was signing up for, and she was invaluable, right? I guess I'm speaking more to the less experienced schools or school leaders who have never done this type of thing, or schools that are renting from churches that are looking at permanence. Because I imagine schools that are even further along than us, our school's not even 20 years old, have a development department. They've done capital campaigns. They've done this. So I think it depends on life stage of school, on your size of school, on a lot of different factors. For us, it was a really invaluable partnership with the focus group and with leadership and development. And we at one point phased out the focus group because it's expensive to do to pay experts to walk you through this process. And so at a certain point, it's like, we can't cash flow this and still, do this other thing. And I think the flip side of that equation would be, can you afford not to, like, if you're not getting it done?
Sure.
So it is costly dollar wise, and without their support, without leadership and development as coaching since then, we would not be as successful as we have been. So
Okay.
There are good practices. They're the ones who will tell you these types of things. Take donors seriously. Don't do all these things. Work within. It's not getting more and more people. It's working with your people better to do that.
Perfect.
All
That's
right.
good.
Cool. Next one, shotgun approach to fundraising, meaning not like fast, but just spread the word more and more and more. It just makes people more frantic, more freaked out. If you say, hey, everybody, we're raising money for this campaign. And so the ideal, I think, way to do that is do a quiet phase. You build, most of the campaign is built in that quiet phase. You raise the funds, and then it's the last 20% or so that you do an all call for. We didn't do that because we didn't have that luxury. We didn't have the timeline. It was we are going now, and our families responded. People respond to critical needs, and so there's a component of that is real, and so anyways. But I think generally speaking, don't do the shotgun approach to fundraising. Hey, everybody, help us, because it just produces anxiety and fear within the community. Is this thing going to happen?
Yep.
Are we going to have a school? Is this going to blow up?
Hey, I just want to take a really quick break from the podcast to highlight one of our amazing partners and sponsors, ClassReach. If you're a new school administrator or founder and are struggling to keep up with all the hassles of planting a new school, like collecting tuition, communicating with parents, or handling student data, then you need ClassReach. ClassReach is the all-in-one software that helps with everything from admissions and tuition to classroom management and parent communications. Sign up for a free consultation with one of their school specialists and see how ClassReach can help your school grow today. You guys can check them out online, classreach.com. They are a kingdom-minded company, and I love their leadership team there. I've become friends with a lot of them. They truly are a great company. I support them and I love them, and you guys will love them too. Check them out at classreach.com. Now, back to the show. Yeah, because if you're suddenly going out, I'm assuming this is what you mean too for this, is like, hey guys, we need to raise $16 million. And everybody looks around, they're like, there's 100 people in this room. Like, what the heck are you talking about? Like, who do you think we are? You know, you're like, okay, is that what you're talking about? Like, people are like, they're going to be super discouraged and be like, no way. Unless you go, hey guys, we've raised $14 million. We have a $2 million left to get this thing done. And they're like, holy smokes. Like, yeah, I'm down to, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, exactly. Because the families who look at like 160 families, let's say, let's do the 80-20 principle. There's 30-ish of those families that have capacity to do gifts of 6 figures or 7 figures, maybe, right? Depends on where you live. But if you're freaking out 160 families, 130 of them really, they might be able to give you $1,000 or maybe stretch or give $5,000 or $10,000. And so that's just the reality of Christian community. Like there are people who the Lord has given more financial talents to steward and those that he has not. And so, I think there can be a tension too of showing partiality just because someone makes more money, that you spend more time or attention or care on their gift compared to, one of our teachers gave a gift, one of the first ones in the campaign. And I know that was actually more of a sacrifice for that person than someone who maybe wrote a 6-figure gift. And so those are like those tension points where you need to honor people well, you need to honor the sacrifice well, and just do good development work of thanking people, taking them seriously, understanding their motivation behind why they give, why they love the school, why they're sacrificing for this. So the other one thing that I would advise against is failing to deeply understand, process, know all the fine details of the contract. So at some point, right, if you're doing a capital campaign, you get into contract phase with a general contractor. And so for us and for me, we kind of started down a path. We got our bids. We ended up going with this company, not this company. Of our, we had 4, down to 2, down to 1, and there were things about the contract. I'm not a commercial construction guy. Like there's no way I could have had scope or schema for understanding some of the nuance and details of these. But that meant I needed to staff around me. Our architect was a blessing. Not a man of faith, but he walks around, he's like, it's almost like this building was built for a school. And I'm like, it's almost like that. So we ended up staffing a grandparent, Steve Nichols, if you're listening, you're the man. A grandparent who was, his career was spent in commercial real estate, not real estate, commercial development. So commercial construction, specifically like mechanical, electrical stuff. But he knew that world, right? And so we were able to say, hey, we can't pay you what you're likely due as an owner's rep is really the position, but would you take less than that and come help us out? And he, like, without him, the thing wouldn't have happened. Like we would not have moved forward. He was on site. He was checking on quality control. He was checking on contract stuff. He was checking on this. And throughout, as you come to a close of the construction and everything. So my last one is don't expect a smooth closeout. And so pair that with know your contract and don't expect a smooth closeout, because the commercial real estate construction, I keep saying real estate, the commercial construction process is it's a whole field, commercial development, commercial real estate, commercial construction. It's a big industry. And so us small little Christian school guys who are just doing our best to run our schools don't always see that big scope unless we walk through it. So know your contract. I would recommend either having some sort of liquid damages if your contract goes after a certain date, and that was something I learned later on that could have even been a possibility. We didn't have that in our contract, but it could have been wise. That means they're going to, on the front end, upcharge their like liability, because if your liquid damages, meaning they would have to pay you for any day they go past the due date. Or we actually, where we landed was A1102 GMP, a guaranteed max price contract, right? So it didn't mean that was for sure the guaranteed max price, but what it did mean was anything that was going to go beyond that was going to be a change order that we were going to sign approval on. Okay, so the reason I say don't expect a smooth closeout is because towards the end of our project, and it was actually at the very end, our construction guys, they've been making these comments in what's called the AOC meeting, the architect owner AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. I don't think that's.
That's what I was like.
It's those three letters. I just, when I typed it said the wrong ones. But architect owner OAC meetings. That's what it is. Owner, architect, contractor. So, sorry AOC. The OAC meeting is a really critical process here, where it's either weekly or biweekly, but you're just getting updates. What's schedule look like? What's cost look like? All those things. And so along the way, our contractors kept saying, "Well, yeah, but we're you're gonna pay for all this at the end." And it's like, we have a guaranteed max price contract. We're signing change orders. There's a price associated with all of these change orders. And so what I didn't see, the detail that I missed either in the contract or in some of these change orders, was sprinkled throughout. There was this placeholder that our contractor had put for extended general conditions. And I hope I'm not speaking ill of them or of us, but we were using language that just was not synced up, right? So they were saying like, yeah, we'll settle up, and we're like, we have a GMP, we're signing this change order, I see some general conditions in here, we're good. And the bills that were coming in, still had our similar number that we were agreeing to. So at the end of our campaign, or at the project, we're closing out, and they come up at us with this bill that's just monstrous in our perspective, and it's hundreds of thousands of dollars that we have not raised for, that we're not expecting, that we're not ready for. And yet they're like, well, you guys signed some change orders that said this thing that was it was a placeholder. And we're like, we had meetings every week. Anyway, so it was a communication thing, I hope, assuming good intent, or it's just a commercial construction practice that we weren't up and up on. And so the further away I get from that, we disagreed, we held out, they held out, there was lawsuits, there was not arbitration, there was mediation. Hopefully that's not oversharing, but I think the reality is you just have to be really dialed in, have a strong pulse as the head of school or person leading a campaign, if you're like on the board, or probably it's head of school and board and owner's rep, that just have to be really calibrated on all of those really, really fine details, because it's a wild ride, wild west out here.
Man, and this is a perfect, thank you for sharing all this, Greg, because I'm hoping it's helpful for those listening to see the other side of it, because I feel like why reinvent the wheel? I mean, we hear that all the time too, of if somebody's already gone through something, learn from them. Obviously this podcast is it's a wealth of knowledge for somebody who's maybe about to go through this or in the middle of it, to go, oh, I never thought about that. Because obviously we don't want you to make somebody else to make the same mistake or the same thing that you could have prevented. That's why there's consultants. That's why there's doctors. That's why there's all these things out there to help you not make certain decisions that you shouldn't have made. That's why I help in student ministry at church. Because I'm like, hey, don't do this thing. I know your parents said the same thing, but maybe you'll hear it from me. Don't do this thing. And it's people have already been there, done that. And so even though with your process, you talked about the guy that was willing to come on that new construction. That's so invaluable to have somebody come in and be like, hey, I know this and I'm going to help you. And I also it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, you weren't asking him to do it for free. You were saying, hey, we're still going to pay you, because I think that's good. I think a lot of times churches, schools, we're like, oh, we just do this out of the kindness of your heart. And maybe there's a place for that, of course. But it's hey, we don't want you working for free. We want you to be dedicated to this and be a part of it. And I really respect the fact that you did that. It sounded like you offered to still pay him something.
100%. You have to, right? If you're doing a building project, it needs to be someone's job to own it. And it's actually probably multiple people's job to own it. So it was my job to own the totality of the process, along with one of our board treasurer at the time, who is kind of in that field-ish. along with this grandpa who was our owner's rep and our full-time architect. I mean, he wasn't full-time with us, but he was our architect. So it really took four um, people's really concentrated time, energy, effort. We had to staff up in those roles. Any one of those people not being there, it just wouldn't have happened. And that meant that the infrastructure for our leadership team, like they bore the brunt of all the operational things for that year and a half. And so anyways, it's critical to build those infrastructure players and pieces and invest in your team such that you're not dependent on for the day to day, because you might have to run out to the city or to a donor meeting or whatever. The other thing I just want to say, don't fail to do is fail to align your family's hearts toward vision, mission, and how this campaign hopefully is vision, mission critical. The what I would encourage you to do is we did the shotgun thing. I wouldn't advise it, but the Lord showed up over and over and over again through the generosity of His people, and so I feel like I've lived through a miraculous thing, and I know the tendency for Christians, for God's people, for the Israelites was to forget so quickly, and so quickly I've found myself being like, man, if only this thing could happen. It's like the Lord, all of this belongs to the Lord. And so to walk in faith, in His strength, in His might, knowing that we're gonna show up. I think we want the Lord to bless the work of our hands, but ultimately it's His work that we're doing. So um, yeah, that was one thing. A couple other quick learnings, if it's okay, Mitchell.
Yeah, please.
Okay. So when I first started this and I was really angsty nervous about fundraising, I'd never done big fundraising. And it's like, I don't even like that word really, the donor development training. So that's a bad word, actually. Don't use that. Um, but it's, I didn't understand. And there was people that said to me along the way, oh, you're wheeling and dealing, or, it's like, I went and I spoke with a local nonprofit guy who had done this really well. I spoke. His name is Matt Wimmer. He's a camp director. I spoke with another head of school, Patrick Caruth, and they both said, you're actually just ministering to people differently, right? So your ministry is not as much leading the school; it is walking alongside people who are generous, who have a passion for the school or education, and who are wanting to steward their wealth, what God has entrusted them well, and then helping give them an opportunity. Like you don't feel awkward when you invite someone over to dinner and they say no. Scott Chin, also Union Gospel Mission, I met with him, and he's like, why aren't you asking people for specific amounts of money? Like, do you feel weird if people say no if you invite them over for dinner and they say no? And I was like, of course not. It's like, it's the same thing. You're giving people an opportunity to steward what God's entrusted to them. And so don't have hurt feelings if they say no, but it really is just for me, it was such an important mind shift in this process to understand I'm actually just ministering to people differently than I have before. My job has shifted in that way. And then I think another thing to be aware of, like a major building project, and I would say majors, there's bigger scopes, obviously, there's bigger projects, but a big project for me, for our school, for this life stage, it was a grind. It was hard. I think there was uh, spiritual battles kind of happening behind the scene with the health of some of our leadership team, families, marriages. Like the devil did not like seeding ground in a dark place to a Christian school that's going to proclaim the gospel, that's going to serve the church of our region. And so it was really I came back the summer that we landed here, and one of my administrators was like, "Oh, Greg, you've gotten more gray in the beard, and your wrinkles are deeper." And so it is a sacrifice. Hopefully, your board sees that, and then eventually says, "Go on a sabbatical or something." And then I genuinely feel like I learned a whole new job. So be ready to be stretched. Be ready to learn new things. The project, the process, this whole thing is a business development thing. You have to learn commercial real estate. You have to learn construction management, project management, and so along that line, you have to make concessions. You have to make compromises, materials, time, costs. And you have to make those decisions thoughtfully, prudently, wisely, with the right amount of voices and not too many voices, and balancing that. So yeah, I guess if you're a school in a similar stage, you're around, peeking around the corner at the capital campaign, involve your board, um, expect to see God show up, and don't forget to mark, don't forget to record that, don't forget to pause and reflect on that, and then as you go forward, once the campaign's done, don't forget to look back and remember God's faithfulness.
And I think through all this, you're saying, I love this so much, Mitchell, that I'm going to start my own business called GregForrestCapitalCampaigns.com to do this for all these other schools across the country, right? You loved it that much?
Oh boy, I there's no more hair for me to lose. So,
so what's there to lose? I mean, I would say, like, hearing this, I'm like, man, this is, I would not want to do that. Like, I would not be signing up for that. Obviously, that's why there's companies out there that, of course, will help people with that. And so it does not sound like something I'd want to do inside, day in and day out, all day long. I guess real quick question for you on this, for I know we need to close it out, is if you could rewind now back to the 2023 and you knew everything you knew now, what would be like that first step? Would you immediately, the first call would be hiring somebody like the focus group? Like that's step one, calling a company. Like if you kind of think back, if you kind of give me it for like a couple minutes, like what would be that thing you would do? If you rewind, you would have done this to start.
What a great question. I mean, I think experience is a great teacher. And so I don't know that, like, reflecting back, I would say, I wish we did this thing differently, because I think at each step, it was like we came to a breaking point where we weren't sure if we were going to fundraise enough or we even had enough capacity within our community. And so that's when we said, all right, focus group, can you help us out? And they responded so beautifully and so quickly. And what they reported to us was that we did the fastest feasibility study of any school that they've ever done because we were on hyperspeed. I mean, it was this frenetic thing. So, so I think what I would do looking back is build in more lead time, right? Rather than launching publicly in May, I think we would have done a whole lot, I guess. And I didn't even know how to do this, though, is the hard part. I didn't know how to have strategic conversations with the right people. I didn't know who the right people were. We hadn't identified them. There had not been any groundwork laid of who is that 20% that can do 80% of the bulk. And so I guess I would just say, unless you have to, do that groundwork first, which the focus group can help you with, leadership and development can help you with. There are these consultant groups that can help with some of these feasibility studies. Generally, if you're doing a large campaign, multiple millions of dollars, a feasibility study, I would say, is probably a good idea, because what they'll work on with you is your development plan or your case. Like, here's why we think this is critical next. And so that communication piece, I really just jumped past that. But that was a huge thing that first summer. We had to build a website for the thing. We had to build a case for why is this critical in our region with this time with our school right now. And we had a compelling story to tell. It's our area is what it is, and yet we're serving the church. We're serving as an outpost for the gospel, which is, it's a hard place to do that, but it's a beautiful thing. So I'm getting rambly again, and yeah, I think doing some more legwork behind the scenes.
I love it. It's good stuff. Well, hey, I'll end with final question everybody gets. Share one final piece of advice for those that are listening.
I don't know if this is which verse this is from, but gird your loins if you're getting ready for a capital campaign. Get ready. It's gonna take a lot from your whole community, from you if you're point person or head of school, and so prepare your heart, prepare your mind, keep your perspective on the owner of 1,000 cattle, the cattle of 1,000 hills, and know that it's all his, and you're just doing your best to be a faithful servant and steward of what God's entrusted to you.
Amen. And you don't know what you don't know, and obviously you learn more from your failures. And I know you came out through this obviously stronger. And I'm thankful that you shared some time. You took some time today to share this with other people. So hopefully, maybe there's some of these pieces they can not make in this process, and they can get on the other side of it, making more money and have more hair than you and I both have because they listened to the advice from you, which would be awesome. So,
That's right.
Greg, thanks for taking time to be on the podcast today again with me, man. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mitchell.
Well, another huge shout out and a thank you to Greg for taking time and being on the podcast today. I love what he's doing up there in Washington and wishing him nothing but the best as he continues to grow that school and educate more students there in the state of Washington. This one was a fun one, and so I learned a ton, and I'm hoping you guys learned a ton because, as always, like I always say, I'm hoping you were able to take at least one thing away from today's episode that you can take back to your school or yourself to make yourself or your school better than they are right now. And if you're in the middle of maybe thinking about a capital campaign, or you're in the middle of a capital campaign, there's a lot of nuggets, good nuggets inside of this episode. If you need to, just go back, listen to it on 1.5 speed if you need to. But there's some good stuff. I want to make sure you guys are not making any of those mistakes because they could be $10,000 mistakes or way, way more, as he was kind of sharing inside of there. So hoping that was fruitful and that was helpful for you in your school journey. And before you guys go, if you haven't heard the spiel before, we got 3 free resources we want to make available to you guys. And the first one is the podcast. Guys, we're making these episodes and dropping them every single Monday morning. I have a lot of fun interviewing school leaders all over the country to hear from them, learn from them, that you guys can then hear from and learn from as well. And these are a lot of fun, and we're dropping the episodes every Monday. So if you don't want to miss them because you're loving the content, then hey, subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to your podcast. And if you love the content, which if you're listening to it right now, I'm hoping that's the case, then we would love a 5-star review. To just pause real quick. 5-star review, boom, back to the podcast. Welcome back. Glad you're here. All right. So that'd be awesome. Thanks for tuning into the podcast. And then the second free resource we have is in the top right-hand corner of our website, schoolsuccessmakers.com. It's the School Success Report. It's emailed directly to your inbox every single week with different articles the team has either written or found online. We do some teacher shout outs and some fun things in there that you want to make sure you don't miss out on. And it's free. So make sure you're getting that in your inbox each and every week. And then last but not least is our Facebook community called School Success Makers. I am personally in there. I'd love to see you in there as well. Get to know you and your school and what you're doing and maybe some challenges you guys are up against because there's other educators inside the group and they're there to help you and be more successful. That's what it's about. Community is important. So I want to make sure you guys have that around you. And then, guys, we're going to be back here next week with another awesome guest as usual on the School Success Podcast. We'll see you then. The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of the Herzog Foundation.